You've written the perfect prose, and you take a moment to savor that perfection. But now, you send the manuscript to your editor, and the wait begins. Editors are an important part of the publishing process, but how do you know your work is in good hands? What kind of editors are there? How do you know which type to engage and when do you engage them? Does the mystique of the editor help or hinder the editorial process? What happens when you and the editor feel at cross purpose? Today's panel will talk about editing and what things look like on the editorial end. In today's Indie Connection, we have a treat. Joe Compton brings us indie films that you may like if you're a fan of Tremors. In our epilogue today, our panel will try and guess my literary identity in 20 questions. So pull out your red pens and strike through all that was. It's time for another well-edited edition of This Week in Indies with your host, SM Hillman.
And now I forgot what I was going to say. That's it. That's all, folks. Good morning, everybody. Happy January 19th, 2025, and welcome to This Week in Indies. I'm your host, messing it up again, SM Hillman. Please pound that like button and subscribe to the metrics. Be nice to you or to us if you be nice to it. Here at Going Now, we rely on a great deal of unscripted and off-the-cuff content, but something like an opening voiceover or this opening monologue was scripted. Unless I've managed to mess it up, as I've done a couple times already, the delivery. No editor can help with that. Editors come in all shapes and sizes and roles. Today, we're going to discuss the role of the editor in writing and publishing. Asking the question, are editors really necessary? I think we know the answer to that. And how important is editing for the indie artist? But before we dive deep, let's have our panelists introduce themselves. Get rid of my face. And we will go ahead and have them introduce themselves. AJ.
Hi, I'm AJ. Hi. I write a lot of romance. I write smut, as it says at the bottom here, wherever that is. I can be found online in most of the places, not the Clock app anymore. It's been taken over by Spirit Halloween, according to the memes. And I'm always using my editor, my mom, who has been a professional editor in the past with her own business. And yeah, gotta have it.
Excellent. Thank you. Tiffany? You're muted.
Tiffany, you're on mute.
I knew that. I was your guys' ability to catch that. No. So I'm Tiffany Vega. I'm the co-owner of Outsider Publishing Company. You can find all of our books on Amazon and at outsiderpublishingcompany.com. And I am living proof, especially with the book to this side from the window, that you need an editor.
Excellent. Lily?
Hi, everyone. I'm Lily Lucchesi. I'm a USA Today bestselling author of urban fantasy, horror, and paranormal. And as you see next to my face, I also write dark romance as S.L. Sinclair. And I'm here today as an editor and the co-founder and owner of Partners in Crime Book Services.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right. And hopefully CL Cannon will be able to join us in a little while. All right. So let's go ahead and just start off a little bit. Before we get too deep into editing as a craft, let's talk about the types of editors, because there are a lot of titles with the word editor in them. Everyone just grab one title and throw it out there, starting with AJ, and what that person, or at least what that person does.
It's like developmental editing, where they go through the book in the early processes, early stages, and help the author work on characters and maybe plot holes, things that are the building blocks to the story, but not necessarily the nitpicky details that the other editors might do.
Tiffany?
A line by line edit, which is they go through each line and make the corrections of punctuation, wording, making sure that the sentences are whole. You're not overusing certain words.
Lily?
I was hoping no one would pick proofreader because that's actually how I began in this industry at the age of 17. And what a proofreader does is once the line and copy edit is done, once the developmental editing is done, occasionally you also need structural editing if you choose that. Once all of those things are done, I edit better than I speak, by the way. Once those things are done, the proofreader goes in and cleans up any tiny little errors. They'll find missing words. They'll find missing punctuation. They'll find if you've switched someone's name that the line editor didn't catch, one day she's Susie, one page, she's Sally. And yeah, proofreader is your cleanup guy.
What about what other kinds of editors are there? Lily, we'll get back with you.
Well, the structural editing, that's something that not all authors need, nor would they be willing to pay for. And that is when the editor takes the draft of your book before developmental edits and looks at your language and looks at your story and changes your wording. A structural edit will actually change your voice. I do perform structural edits. I personally am not a fan of those. Of course, again, if a client wants it, I do it. I prefer keeping a voice whole, but yeah, structural editing is something that is, I think a lot of newer authors who have never written a book before may benefit from getting a structural edit done. Even if you don't use it, it's very beneficial to look at the craft from a different angle when you're new to the business.
Tiffany, another kind of editor you can think of?
I don't know if I can think of any other ones.
I just like my editor is my mom, so yeah, the maternal editor.
The family reader. What is so if you could just tell us a little bit what that relationship is like as editor and writer.
It's kind of funny because my mom thankfully is able to separate the daughter from the author with the stuff that I write, because it can get dark and it can get kind of not kind of really descriptive, and but she's great about just looking at the sentences and the wording and making sure I've got all my ducks in a row as far as that goes. It's kind of hilarious because I sent her Tiffany right now is reading one of my books, Irresistible Monstrosities, and the second book I sent my mom after that was a contemporary. And Irresistible Monstrosities, like the title suggests, has some monstrous creatures in it. And my mom was like, I don't know what to do without tentacles in here.
That's pretty
Because it was
funny.
contemporary, the next one. And so she's great with taking it in stride and being professional about it. She'll tell me if something sounds weird because to her ear, maybe as a generation older than me, it might sound a little weird, but to my generation, we're like, oh yeah, I know what that is,
And again, just a quick, was the fact that she worked as an editor instrumental at all in you taking up writing?
I just always enjoyed telling stories and writing stories and making up my own little characters in my head. My mom is a writer as well, but she writes historical romance, romantic intrigue, stuff that I don't really read. Never read any of her books, which is probably terrible to say because she's read like all of mine because she edits them. But it's just I don't think it was really influential, other than that just being part of life is, oh, mom's in her study with the door closed. She's writing, leave her alone.
Right. Absolutely. Cool. All right. Okay. So now that we sort of talked about the types of editors, I'm wondering if, and Lily, we'll start with you, just to humanize the editor for a minute, do you have any like a funny editing story? Obviously, we don't have to have names and books and things like that, but something that struck you as particularly amusing when you read it, or an interaction that was funny in some way with a writer, something that just stands out.
There's a couple. I have one of my clients. She will actually leave notes for me in the manuscript. Like, she'll leave her own comments. Like, help me out here. What the fuck is this? I don't remember what I was trying to say. Can you figure this sentence out? And it's like, I like a self-aware author. I like an author who can make light of their own editing. But one of my funniest things that just happened to me, I don't use any sort of like spell checker, but I do turn it on just to have something that tracks what I'm doing for me, because it tracks it on the side while I'm tracking stuff for the author. And instead of saying something was going to be claimed, it popped up on the side and said something should be clammed. And I lost it. I lost it because with everything that's going on right now, seeing the computer say that someone needed to be clammed, I'm going to clam her is what it was. Clam. And I had to put a screenshot up because I'm like, that's... So I think the funniest things that happen are usually just in the moment when I'm sitting there looking at like either the author, what the fuck? Or the computer, what the fuck?
Gotcha. Tiffany, what about you? Something that stands out as particularly funny?
Well, for me, because I do no type of like self-editing. I mean, obviously edit my own stuff, but as far as like professional editing, the funniest thing that stands out in my writing journey with my editor was the very first book that she sent me, and it happens to be the one on the screen from the window. I did not understand track changing. Like, she did track changing, and so I went through, like, instead of like accepting everything, I went through hand by hand changing it, and I missed over half of what she suggested because of doing that. And end up, as you know, John, I went back and re-edited it this year and got it, edited again, where I realized what track changing was, and it was a lot of money to edit this book twice, and only fully understanding what I was doing the first time.
Right.
And it was. I still laugh about it because it's like, how did I not understand what I was doing?
AJ, what about you?
Oh, I was I wrote a book recently with it was male romance, so two men, and one of the men was in the end epilogue, paragraph or chapter going over how things turned out at the end. He was talking about how he loved being his partner's human fleshlight, and my mom made a little note. She's like highlighted it, and she's like, I don't know what this is. I'm like, oh, Mom, sorry, Mom. That is the correct word, yes, but I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, that no doubt.
She goes and Googles what it is.
Now, Tiffany, I do have to tell you, the not knowing track changes thing, that actually happens so much more than you think. I have had to teach a couple of clients, one just very recently, what track changes was via Word. And I had another client a few years ago. It was her very first book. So she knew absolutely nothing. She's great now. She's still with me 4.5 years later. But she had no idea. And I got the book back for its final proof after. And I'm like, why are so many of my edits not accepted? I'm like, these are technical. And she's like, well, I did by hand. I'm like, oh, that would be the reason. You missed quite a few.
This was my very first book, so I didn't understand. And it took me... Thank you. I have many books now, or several books now, but it didn't. I had the same editor for my second book, and she helped me with it. And I was just like, why didn't I? I was so scared to ask how to do this that I just did it by hand. I was so scared, and I wasn't like comfortable with my writing yet, and so I just did it by hand. And I've
heard that talking to the editors and asking questions can be scary. I guess there have been people who have also been, they ask a question of their editor and their editor's just like, well, you should just be listening to me. And they get a little, haughty. And it's like, oh, no wonder you guys, so many people are like very skittish about editors. Like, no, most of us, the good ones, were all nice. I promise. All nice.
So A.F. Stewart saying hello. Hi, A.F. Stewart. Tiffany breaking the fourth wall for us. Hello. Miss Alicia Full. I think I got that. Yeah, I think so. I got that right. Hello. Hi. Thank you for coming today. So let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk about in the context of a word of caution, especially to indie authors, but not just to indie authors, right? Who might be listening. A bad experience. AJ, I realize that we would be, saying something bad about your mom, but maybe a misunderstanding that wasn't necessarily funny, or something that in the relationship with an editor might be useful. A cautionary tale, maybe.
What do you think? I mean, I've done some editing as well, and sometimes it's tough making changes for an author when you're trying to correct the grammar or correct phrasing, but you don't want to take away their voice, and that's very difficult. It's a difficult line to walk, because some authors can take it personally. They can be like, "Wait, this isn't how I wanted it. I wanted it this way." It's like, well, okay, but that's not right, you know. And some do take it so personally that they don't accept what the editor is saying, and then you get dinged by the readers. They're like, this is wrong. What are they doing publishing this? And it's like,
right.
Yeah.
So how do you navigate moments like that?
Luckily, I've edited for people who understand that I'm trying to help their writing and not trying to destroy their writing. And I think that's one of the things is, as an author or an editor, you've got to understand, from both sides of it. And you've got to understand the editor is trying to help you. They are not trying to destroy your work or take away your words and make them into their own. They're trying to make it cleaner, neater, better, more understandable, whatever. You got to understand that you got to work with the editor. And yeah, sometimes it means changing your pretty little darling sentence you love so much into something else. Sometimes that's what you got to do.
Tiffany, what about you? Any cautionary tales from editing, or something that didn't go as well?
So, as somebody who is not an editor myself, again, being on the opposite end, just make sure that you're ready for edits, because I've sent my manuscript in and I had my deadline and I didn't quite make it there. And so I sent the first part of the story to my editor, and it had the wrong back half of it. And so when I sent her the second half, she's like, "Oh, I've already edited this." And it was my miscommunication, not hers. But it is, make sure that what you're sending to her is what you want, or them. Make sure it is what you want them to have, and not try to do it in pieces. Just make sure you're ready.
Gotcha. Lily, what about you?
Similar to what AJ said, one of the biggest cautionary things is I have a client whom I have worked with for her entire series. It sells quite well, and it's a great series. I have enjoyed following all the characters for all of these years. But one of the things when I was initially speaking with her, when she was interviewing me before hiring me, she said, "I am from a very particular place, and I write in a regional dialect. My characters are from there." And I kind of explained to her, I'm like, some of it's going to have to be changed because people are not going to understand some of what's being said, some of the grammar, some of the slang. It's not, just like me being from Chicago, my editor had to change some of my slang. It's like, yes, your characters are from there, but you need it to be universal to the readers. And I did explain that to her. She came back to me with, only change my voice where someone 100% can understand it. So okay, that's fine. That's in our contract. And recently, she came to me very concerned about bad reviews she was getting on language and grammar and prose. And I told her, I said, I did warn you a couple of years ago, this was going to happen. So we've worked with it. The next book that she gives me, I'm going to have to work on it more. She understands that. Because it's important to have a good reader experience. But like AJ said, you have to work with your editor, and you have to understand your editor is not trying to ruin your book. Your editor is not trying to change your book. They're not trying to change you, your characters. An editor's job, and I always say this, it's like a producer of a song. You need to be a great singer in order to make that song good. You can't be a bad singer. But you also need a good producer to polish it up. You can't just put a raw studio vocal out there. You can't put a raw book out there. And a good editor can't fix a bad book, and a bad editor will actually make a good book worse. So you do have to, cautionary tale for indie authors who maybe haven't hired an editor or have to do a search for a new one. Interview your editors, get a sample edit. Some of us have them free. Some people are talking about going back to paid samples. Mine are still free for the moment. I may have to go back to paid as well. But just talk with your editors. Make sure you guys are a good fit, because you can have a great editor, but you're also not a good fit with them. So that's an extra cautionary tale just for the indies. Make sure you know who you're hiring and make your needs and wants very clear. And if you're confused about anything, also communication, it must be done.
Excellent. Yeah, that communication is very important with the editors. Hacking onto a couple things you said, let's just talk to the indie author for a moment, because I think a lot of us, and I was that person at one time too, was like, oh, I don't need to pay somebody X, Y, and Z to edit my book. I can do it myself, or I can have my friend Bob. I'm not talking about you, Bob. I'm talking about a theoretical Bob. My friend Bob will write it for me, and that's fine. Bob got A's in English class. Why is the editor so important? Even if it's just someone who's correcting your grammar and spelling.
Because you're not going to catch everything. Your brain is going to put what you intended in there, regardless of what errors might be or how glaring the error might be. Your brain is going to insert what you intended when you're reading it because you wrote it yourself. You know what it's supposed to say. You need someone who hasn't been inside your head when it was written to read it and say, this doesn't make any sense. You put the wrong word here. You've got to have someone who's distanced enough from it that they don't know what your intent was. That way, if there's something that is not clear, the editor can pick it up because they don't have the intent already in their head, and they don't have that clouding their vision of looking for the errors, because you might not catch them yourself. Your brain is going to fill in what it knows it's supposed to be, and that's going to leave stuff that the reader's going to be like, what's this?
Gotcha. Tiff, Lily? Oh, go ahead, Tiff.
I would have to say it just as it for me as an indie author, a lot of people won't give an indie author book a huge chance anyways, because they're like, oh, it's not going to be edited anyways. And I learned that the hard way. And so it's really good to have an editor to catch all your misspellings so they don't lump everybody into that same, oh, it's just an indie author. They can't afford an editor. They, can't afford a nice cover. They can't, it like gives that stereotype life if you don't edit it or have somebody edit it.
Right. Yeah.
I want to touch on something that you said within the question, and it's, why should I pay someone? That question I get asked all the time. I had a prospective client. I also do blurb writing, which is more on the marketing side, and blurb editing. And one of my blurb clients asked for my editing prices, and the response was, oh, I can't afford that right now. Now, my prices, and I've talked about this before, I keep them deliberately as low as possible just to make a living, just so I can pay my bills. Because indie publishing is very expensive. If you go about it the right way, like Tiffany was saying, you have to pay your editor, you have to pay for a cover, you got to pay for the book to look pretty inside when it's a paperback. You have to do those things now. Otherwise, it will look bad to the readers. But I think the most important thing to understand is, why should you? And like AJ said, you know your story. You need someone to look at who doesn't. And I think a lot of people, they see it as unnecessary expense. Like I got all A's in English, I'm fine. I did have a client who has a lot of technical typing errors, And she messaged me with her second book and said, well, I had an English teacher who's a friend of mine go over it. Can you charge me a little bit less? And, I took a breath and like, send me a second sample. Because usually I don't need a sample except for the very first time I work with you. Some people like to send me more, but usually I don't. No, I could not charge less. No, there was not going to be less work needed to be done. An English teacher is not an editor. Someone who got good grades is not an editor. A beta reader is not an editor. Your PA is likely not your editor. Now, I shouldn't be saying that because I do PA work too, but that's secondary to editing. You need a professional editor. A lot of people go with any of those other things just to save money. We charge because we know what we're doing. We have studied. I've studied the Chicago Manual of Style, including the one that just came out in September. Up and down. I have studied multiple genres in depth. I have studied language, grammar, everything. Most people have not done that. So that is why you need an editor, because we specialize in editing. It's not just high school English. It's not even college English or university English, depending on where you live. We know what we're doing on a very different level, especially for developmental, because developmental editing actually goes hand in hand with marketing. If you hire or you get your friend who just reads nonfiction to read your monster smut book, you're not going to get the proper editing for that. You are going to get someone who does not understand what the genre requires, because all genres have certain beats that you need to hit. And an editor also does that. And that's so vitally important to your marketing before you even open your book up to readers. A developmental edit is vital to marketing.
Right. I mean, it's important to have someone who understands the idioms of the genre you're writing in, too, I would think.
Yes, like I don't edit space operas. That's the one genre I've never read for pleasure. I mean, I literally read everything, but I've never been a huge fan of those. So I don't edit those. I will proofread them. I will line edit them. I can't developmentally edit those.
Gotcha. Just real quick, and this is open to everyone. What's the you've all kind of given a little bit of advice, but just a quick piece of advice on handling how to approach an editor if you have a sort of big disagreement, right? It's like, I really feel strongly about this piece. What's the best way to approach an editor, in your opinion, in that regard? Because before, to prevent it becoming combative, right?
Yeah,
I have had that happen. Oh, you guys go ahead. Go ahead. I've talked enough.
Let's start with you. Oh, Tiffany, go ahead. Yeah, Tiffany, go ahead.
I was going to say, just as somebody that is like not the editor side, I would just ask questions like, okay, can you tell me like why this might be wrong? How can I still keep what I feel like I'm trying to say with it being, correct? And most people will tell you like, oh, your story the best, and it really depends if it's a developmental edit, if it's a line edit, if it's a developmental edit, you could probably still keep what you're trying to put, but maybe at a different beat point. Maybe it's, you're doing your climax a little too early, and you can just, take that group and, rewrite it where it's down further. If it's just your voice in a certain sentence, but asking questions, I think, is the best advice as to why you're doing it wrong. One, you're learning. Two, they're explaining to you. And three, you guys can come up with some kind of agreement of how to fix it.
And I think part of it is also you got to respect your editor. You can't just vomit words onto a page and say, here, fix it. You've got to respect the editor's job, respect how much work goes into it. Like I try not to give my mom as much work as possible. I try to clean it up as much as I can before she even gets it. I write the way I want it read. I write from chapter 1, page 1, all the way down to the end in order, the way I want it read. I write it. Sometimes I've had to tell my mom not to worry about formatting because sometimes she's so used to my books being almost formatted already, aside from being double spaced, make it easier for her. she's used to being, almost all ready to go. So I had to tell her, no, don't worry about formatting. I'll take care of that after. If this page doesn't line up with this page or whatever, if there's an extra page in there somewhere for some reason, I'll take care of that later. Just look at the words, because I'll take care of the formatting. But sometimes writers, they don't respect the editor enough, and I think that causes a lot of strife. If you give them something that's clean and at least looks like you made an effort to fix it, it's going to go a lot smoother than if you just throw your first draft at them and say, here, have fun.
I feel like I said, don't worry, most editors are nice, and I'm about to say this next phrase. I have given clients ultimatums. Either your next book is better self-edited, or one of two things is going to happen. One, you will be charged by how the contract says, because there's so much more work done than the average book of this length, or I will no longer work with you. It is a matter of respect. Just like AJ said, it is respect. And what Tiffany said, yes, just ask questions. As long as you're polite, yes, again, we are nice. Don't come at us with attitude. Well, why would you do this? Ask, hey, what was this? There's such a difference in tone there. But another thing that someone should look for in an editor, once an editor has been around long enough, most of us can predict what people are going to ask about certain changes. So what I do is I open every new client with, if you have any questions, come to me. Everything that I put in this manuscript and edit, at the end of the day, it's the author's decision. It's your decision. So if you choose to not accept something that I've suggested, no matter what it is, how big or how small, that is on you. That is not on me. That is not on your editor. And that's why I always keep edits for a very, very long time, just in case anyone were to go to me and be like, well, you edited this book and this was horrible. No, slow down. Because people actually do come to editors and attack us if they find that a book was bad. They really do. But I'll always leave notes also in the manuscript itself explaining why certain things were changed. I've had to go back and forth with clients explaining what passive voices you need to rewrite. I mean, I've had clients do top to bottom rewrites just to rephrase almost half their sentences. And they do ask why, and I explain why. And I'll try and explain why before they even ask, if I can, because I feel like it makes it smoother for them. An editor's job is to make the author's life a little bit smoother. And I think that minimizing questions before they've even gotten their manuscript back is extremely important for a good editor to do.
Gotcha. Awesome. All right. Ariel, stop by. When you're looking for an editor, is it important to find someone who either reads or writes in the same genre as the author? Right? Yeah. Lily did. I think you just answered my question, Lily. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's very important. If someone doesn't understand your style, just as a very, very brief story, I was with a writing group, and this is not specifically an editing thing, but they're all interested in reading what the work in progress. And I was a speculative fiction writer, and they were all sort of slice of life writers. And so when they read it, they're like, oh, we don't, what is it? What is this? This is, for them, it was like, oh my God, this is terrible. There's violence in your book. What's going on here? So they had, they were completely dumbfounded by what I wrote. So I didn't stay with that group very long. It's not their fault, right? But they didn't write, not only didn't write the same kind of thing I did, they didn't see why anyone would write the same kind of thing I did. So, yeah, that kind of thing is very important.
You have to find your people. Your editing team. If you write multiple genres, again, I can edit multiple. Some editors do, some don't. You need your team for each genre, each pen name, or for whatever. You need your team who understands you. These aren't just employer-employee situations. You should look for a team to have on your side.
Absolutely. All right, so let's take a break now from our talk about editing to do the Indie Film Connection. Joe's going to be talking to us today about films that you may like if you're a fan, like I am, of Tremors.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Indie Film Connection. I am your host, Joe Compton, and today I have indie films that you might enjoy if you were a fan of the book series that was turned into a movie, Tremors, starring Kevin Bacon and Fred Ward and directed by Ron Underwood. It is celebrating its 35th anniversary today as it was released on January 19th. The first movie I have for you is called Book of Monsters, a film by Stuart Spark. Sophie's 18th birthday becomes a bloodbath when 6 monsters descend upon her house, intent on devouring the party gifts and killing anyone who tries to leave. As her high school friends are torn apart and eaten, Sophie must rally a band of misfits and take up arms to send their party crashers back to hell. In order to survive the night, Sophie will face her destiny. Monsters are real, and she is the only one that can stop them. You can watch this movie for free right now on Tubi. The next indie film I have for you is an indie cult classic. It's called The Gate by Tibor Tadakis. When Al and Glenn's parents leave town for the weekend, Al uses the opportunity to throw a party while little brother Glenn and his friend Terry decide to explore a hole left by a tree removal service in the backyard. When the unexplainable phenomenon begins occurring, Terry, with the help of his extensive heavy metal music collection, comes to the conclusion that he and Glenn have accidentally opened a gateway to hell. You can watch this movie for free right now on Tubi. The next indie film I have for you is called The Host by Bong Joon-ho. Careless American military personnel dump chemicals into South Korea's Han River. Several years later, a creature emerges from the tainted waters and sinks its ravenous jaws into local residents. When the creature abducts their daughter, a vendor and his family decide that they're the only ones who can save her. This movie is available right now for purchase on Prime Video. And finally, the last indie film I have for you is called Big Fur. It is a documentary by Dan Wayne. Big Fur documents Ken's obsessive research and his meticulous Bigfoot recreation from start to the moment he unveils it at the World Taxidermy Championships. While Ken would love to win Best in Show, his real hope is that putting Patty on display will prompt some hunter to open his freezer and pull out proof that Bigfoot is real. Instead, it's Ken's love life that gets thought out. Ken lives on the eastern slopes of the Canadian Rockies, where folks still hunt and trap as a way of life. Is it possible that Bigfoot exists in this remote and vast landscape? According to the people we meet in this film, encounters are more common than you might think. But wilderness areas everywhere are shrinking, and all wildlife populations are going away, including Bigfoot. If they exist, they might just be in danger. You can watch this movie for free right now on Tubi. That's all I have for you this time. We'll see you again next time on the Indie Film Connection. Bye.
Joe always finds the best music for these things, really.
I'm like rocking out.
Okay. So we've already talked about some things that are good for the new writer. Some very good advice, I think, in that regard. What about for someone who wants to become an editor, right? I don't think just because you're a good or great or a fantastic writer, that necessarily translates into editing, right? But so what do you think for someone, maybe they're not a writer, who might be interested in getting into editing? Lily, let's start with you, because you mentioned a few things that you studied yourself that helped you be successful in editing.
One of the first things I think, and people might not realize this, I do think you need to have a bit of a natural inclination towards editing, towards correction, especially if you want to do developmental. You do have to have this kind of natural thing. One of the things that I noticed looking back as a kid was me finding plot holes in some of my favorite books and TV shows and animes. And I still do that to this day, but that's something, I think a natural inclination is something that very much helps for editing. Same with writing, those are two very different things. One is you just want to craft the story. The other one is you want to tweak and fix the story. And yes, there's a lot of studying that needs to be done. once you've decided I want to edit, you do need to, again, Chicago Manual style, that is what most fiction is done in. You need to study the latest version. It also can be helpful to study older ones. I would not, because if you're new, you might get confused as to what's incorrect and what's been changed. I'm still working on remembering to implement these changes as well. Like, I keep my ebook next to me while I'm editing just in case. It's also important to know, do you want to proofread? Are you good at finding just those little leftover typos? Do you want to line edit? Are you good with grammar? Are you good with structure? Do you want to developmental edit? Do you want to do more than that? There are a lot of resources out there. There are actually some writers' resources. Story Genius by Lisa Crone would be one of the books I'd recommend if you want to be a developmental editor. It's great for writers. It's meant for writers, but it works for editors as well. But again, the number one thing you need to have is drive and a natural inclination. And then the second thing after studying, because studying, that's above all of this. That's not even on this list. The second thing is, don't go into this being like, oh, it's easy money. I have had people pop into my inbox and say, oh, I think I should take up editing as a side gig. It's so great for some extra cash. I'm like, editing's not a side gig. Editing's a full-time job. If you want to get into editing and you want to do it professionally, you need to understand that number one is going to be hard. And number two, it's a lot of time. It's not as quick as you think it is. And if your first inclination is it's fast, easy money, please don't become an editor.
SM,
You're muted.
I am muted. AJ or Tiffany?
I would say it's definitely you've got to, like she said, like Lily said, have an inclination for it. You've got to be able to pick out the details and look at the details and look beyond the prose to the story as a whole and also in parts. You got to be able to pick it apart and also look at it as the entire piece, because otherwise you're going to miss something that's maybe interconnected. My mom caught something in just my last book that I released. I had a character's hand zip tied, and then 2 chapters later, he ripped the bag off his head when he got put in a room by himself. It's like, Mom's like, you had him tied up. How'd he get the bag off his head? And I'm like, oh yeah, damn it. So, you got to be able to look at the whole and the parts simultaneously, and that can be tough.
Tiffany?
For me, I don't have I know I can never be an editor. I just know it. Like, I don't have that much patience to do it at all. And the closest thing that I do is I beta read for people, and it's, and I can catch a couple of developmental edits for them and, give my thoughts on the book. But there's no way that I could ever do that for on a professional level. That's why I hire people. That is why I'm, as far as editing, I'm a huge advocate for getting the developmental edit, the line edit, and the proofreading, because without those are the 3 things that will make your book, make it or break it for a good read for your readers. If you don't do beta readings, if you don't do any other editing of any sort, those are the 3 things that, really matter. And I know that I can never do that on my own.
Right. Yeah,
I often tell clients to go in and get someone who is a beta reader before you even send it to edits. A beta reader is going to find some of the most random things for you first. So your editing process then goes smoother and may cost a bit less if you don't have, glaring plot holes and have to rewrite while you're with the editor, rewrite while you're with the beta.
Yep, makes sense. Does editing, and I think this is probably mostly for you, Lily, although AJ as well, does editing make it harder to read for pleasure?
Yes. It always has, though. Even before I was an editor, I would be finding things as a kid, as a teenager, in my favorite books, because that's also something that readers, how Tiffany was saying earlier, how readers scoff at indie books. There are so many errors, whether they be plot holes or typos in traditionally published books. There was one point because one of the things an editor does is can take out a character that's unnecessary. I, in my head, rewrote a whole 7-book series because one character was not necessary. Period. He was not necessary to any of the books he was in, and the plot was actually tighter without him. And so that's just one of the things that I did, and that was before I was a professional. So, reading, I do have to kind of turn that part of my brain off, but it doesn't turn off. It doesn't like to turn off. So I just kind of sit there and I'm like, okay, stop looking for anything. Stop looking for the filler words. Not everyone's going to delete those. Just calm and enjoy the book.
Well,
Yeah,
but I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It is tough because even though I'm not for the most part a professional editor, I do help people out, friends out occasionally, and I've helped my mom out with her editing business before, but I don't consider myself necessarily a professional editor because I'm not as deep into it as Lily is necessarily. I have not read the Chicago Manual of Style except for glancing at what I needed to format my papers in school or whatever, So that's just me, but I still can't read a book and just glide past any errors that I see because my brain sees them and says, "Oh, that's not right. That's got to be fixed." And it's really tough to read for enjoyment in that case because like you can't just enjoy the story for what it is. You're like picking apart the bits and pieces, and that makes it really tough to enjoy it. It's like a film critic. A lot of film critics don't like some of the movies that are made for pure entertainment because they're picking apart the critical aspects and they're not looking at just the broad picture.
Conversely, a well-edited book, is that something that you really enjoy? Is that like, oh my gosh, this is so well done?
When I see a book that just the writing just flows that smoothly, again, it's like my earlier comment about the singer and the producer. When you hear a song that's just that good, sometimes one of those ones that go viral, one of those ones that you see, 1 billion, 2 billion streams on Spotify, and you listen and you're like, oh, I get it. I get it. This is hitting my brain just the right way. And that is what a well-edited book will do because you know that the author's talented and the editor did their job, both. And I'm not going to say that's rare to find, but it can be rare to find, even in TradPub. You'll find errors in so many of their books. So it does get harder and harder to find.
Awesome. All right. Okay. So I appreciate everybody talking about editing. Hopefully folks out there understand it a bit better and will feel more comfortable. Just a couple little things. One thing I noticed on YouTube, there are a lot of advertisements now for people basically saying the reason why most indie books don't sell is blah 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 blah. They're not well edited. Da, 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 da. You see the same thing with other professions, sort of viralizing, I guess, editorial services like that. Is that something that's good or bad for your business, for business in general?
It's very bad. The number one rule with advertising for a consumer, if the advertisement is at all putting you down, making fun of you, telling you your shit, don't go for whoever made that advertisement. If someone's advertising a new health food that is to make you healthier, but the advertisement says, are you fat? Do you want to lose that weight? No, you don't want that. They're not. People try to market through fear. They try to market through insecurities. And those people who are marketing, they're editing that way, they're doing the exact same thing. So if anyone is putting you down in order to lift themselves up and make you pay them, don't pay them because they are not going to be good at their job. So that annoys me greatly. The first thing that you learn is it's kind of called a shit sandwich. Yes, there's going to be criticisms, but put those criticisms between the good things. You want to encourage people. You don't want them to think, oh my God, I'm horrible. I must need something more. No, that's not a mindset you should go into getting a service with.
Gotcha.
And for me, I much rather work for somebody that, like, say, like Lily, than some big company that is putting advertising out about trying to get thousands of indie authors to publish. I want a one-on-one relationship with my editor. I want the same editor that I've worked with, that knows me, that knows my style of writing, that we can communicate instead of getting a automatic message from somebody saying, "Oh, we'll get back to you when one of our representatives are there." And I know somebody who went to one of the, like, those big advertising company, and it was multiple editors working on her work, and she was not impressed by it at all. She actually asked for a refund because it was so horribly written, and she's an editor herself. She was just trying to, do it to make sure she wasn't missing anything. And but I'd much rather have a one-on-one relationship with my editor, that personalized, I can ask questions with and get answers back.
Do we think that some of that is AI editing? I mean, can an AI actually edit your work? I don't think it really can yet, but
I see it constantly, and everyone's talking about, oh, paying an AI to edit your book is so much cheaper than paying a human. But you are getting a very standardized, computerized response. Maybe it can find a plot hole. People are saying it can. That's great, but can it make your book sound like a human? Or is it going to make your book and spew it back at you sounding like something that was regurgitated from, one of those vanity publishers who just puts out whatever just to make $1? That's what the LLMs are trained on. And I'm not saying that if someone wants to use an AI, I'm a big fan of assistive AI. One of the best editing tools in the world is Word's read aloud feature. And I tell my clients to use that. One of my clients, when she began, her books were completely transformed because she was hearing these things as she was writing, and it's amazing. So assistive AI, Pro Writing Aid, not as big of a fan of Grammarly, but if you want to use that, if you want to attempt a spell checker and get clammed. But assistive AI, I think it's a great tool for a writer. I don't believe generative AI should be editing your work. I don't believe that it gives a human's touch. And I'm not just saying that because I have actually lost clients whom I turn around and see them posting pro AI edits after they haven't hired me for the past few books. And it hurts a little bit. I understand it's much cheaper than paying a person, $50 for the premium LLM, whatever that is. That's a lot cheaper, but you have to understand you need a human's touch. This is human to human. This is just, you can't just trust a computer to do something like that. Because again, assistive AI and generative AI, two different things. And I will always advocate for an assistive AI while you're writing and self-editing.
And you get what you pay for. So if you're paying AI, you're getting an AI voice, not a human voice.
right. All right. So let's go ahead and tackle what's going to happen this week. This week's broadcast for Go Indie Now. It's a very exciting week. Well, it's always an exciting week. Yeah. On Monday, we have 21 Grams at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. All these times are Eastern, if I forget to mention that. 21 Grams at 7 p.m. with Ben Meeks. Ben's a great guy, great writer. You'll really enjoy that. At 8 p.m., we have our next Hit the Dice. It's a Hit the Dice campaign number 9. The game is Sixes and Eights, GM'd by and written by SM Hillman. That'll be at 8, from 8 to 10 Eastern. That'll be a lot of fun to actually see how it plays out. Wednesday, we have Words That Kill, Season 3, Episode 9, The Accidental Death with Wayne Turmel? Wayne, apologies if I messed that up. Turmel, I think, yeah, at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And then Saturday, Spotlight 2025, Above the Rain Connection with publisher Juliet Rose, again, 8 p.m. Eastern, here on the Go Indie Now Network. We've had a bit of a difficulty because we're going to skip our epilogue for this week. My apologies. I know you all have a lot of fun with that. So, Lily, if you will, start with you. Tell people where they can find you on the web.
You can find me anywhere on the internet under Lily Lucchesi. I am on Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, Facebook as a profile, and a Facebook page just for my author work. You can find me, if you like dark romance, as SL Sinclair or Serena Sinclair on Facebook, as Read SL Sinclair on Instagram and Threads. I'm currently working on a Blue Sky for that author profile as well. And if you want to talk to me about editing, proofreading, or the other assorted services I offer, which include blurb editing, blurb writing, and formatting, you can find Partners in Crime Book Services on Facebook or on Substack, or you can actually just send me a message through Facebook as well. I do my best to get back to everyone within 48 hours. And yeah, I would love to work with you.
One of these weeks, we're going to have just Lily on so she can tell us how she juggles all those various work that she does.
Insomnia and ADHD.
Thanks so much. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Tiffany?
Hi, I'm Tiffany Vega. You can find me at Outsider Publishing Company. And all my books are on Amazon, Kindle Unlimited. So go check them out, all under Tiffany Vega.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here today with us, Tiffany. AJ, send us out.
You can find me at ajmulligan.com. You can find me at ajmulligan.com/author for my social media links. I have taken off the clock app because that's no longer applicable. And you can find me on Amazon. All my books are available there that I have out. Just search AJ Mulligan and you'll find me.
Thank you so much. Thanks for participating today. We really appreciate it. I want to thank all our panelists today, all the people who left comments, everyone who's watching, those of you in the future. Oh, we might have one last comment. A.F. Stewart. Catching mistakes. Yep, absolutely. And again, I'm SM Hillman. You can find me here on the Go Indie Now Network doing Go Indie Now things. Catch us Monday for Hit the Dice. We love to have people watch us. Trust me, the group that's playing this week is all shenanigans. So y'all have a good week. Hit like and subscribe on the way out. And hold on. And it's always time for Sean to have a moment, right? It's always time to go indie now. Thanks, folks.